This is the Advanced Brain Podcast with third-generation neurotechnology pioneer, entrepreneur, best-selling author, music producer, keynote and TEDx speaker, Alex Doman. Improve your mental wellness as Alex sits down with the leading thought leaders of our time about how to optimize your brain, body, and life with the latest and most powerful tools to help you reach your unlimited potential. This episode was previously recorded and released as part of the Sound Brain Fitness series and is being re-released here in the Advanced Brain Podcast. Now, listen in and discover how to become the best version of yourself with Alex Doman.
I'm your host, Alex Doman from Advanced Brain Technologies. You can learn more about our vision to advance people's brains for a better life at advancedbrain.com. I am very excited about tonight's discussion and my guest, who I feel so privileged to have join me again for a second time on TLP Radio to talk about his book, Brain Maker: The Power of Gut Microbes to Heal and Protect Your Brain for Life, which is already a New York Times bestseller. Now, debilitating brain orders are on the rise from children diagnosed with autism and ADHD to adults developing dementia at younger ages than ever before. But a medical revolution is underway that can solve this problem. Astonishing new research is revealing that the health of your brain is, to an extraordinary degree, dictated by the state of your microbiome, the vast population of organisms that live in your body and outnumber your own cells 10 to 1. What's taking place in your intestines today is determining your risk for any number of brain-related conditions. In his latest book, Brain Maker, the New York Times #1 best-selling author Grain Brain uncovers the powerful role of gut bacteria in determining your brain's destiny. Neurologist David Perlmutter, MD, explains the potent interplay between intestinal microbes and the brain, describing how the microbiome develops from birth and evolves based on lifestyle choices, how it can become sick, and how nurturing gut health through a few easy strategies can alter your brain's destiny for the better. With simple dietary recommendations and a highly practical program of 6 steps to improving gut ecology, Brain Maker opens the door to unprecedented brain health potential. Now let me tell you more about my guest. David Perlmutter, MD, is a board-certified neurologist and fellow of the American College of Nutrition, who received his MD degree from the University of Miami School of Medicine, where he was awarded the Leonard G. Roundtree Research Award. Dr. Perlmutter is a frequent lecturer at symposia sponsored by such medical institutions as Columbia University, Scripps Institute, and Harvard. He has contributed extensively to the world medical literature with publications appearing in the Journal of Neurosurgery, the Southern Medical Journal, Journal of Applied Nutrition, and Archives of Neurology. He is the author of several books, including the Better Brain book and the #1 New York Times bestseller, Grain Brain. He's recognized internationally as a leader in the field of nutritional influences and neurological disorders. You may have seen or heard Dr. Perlmutter interviewed on many nationally syndicated radio and television programs, including 2020, Larry King Live, CNN, Fox News, Fox and Friends, The Today Show, Oprah, Dr. Oz, and the CBS Early Show. In 2002, Dr. Perlmutter was the recipient of the Linus Pauling Award and for his pioneering work in the application of free radicals to clinical medicine. He is the recipient of the 2006 National Nutrition Foods Association Clinician of the Year Award. Dr. Perlmutter serves as a medical advisor for the Dr. Oz Show and as a scientific advisor to us at Advanced Brain Technologies. Welcome back to the Listening Program Radio, Dr. Perlmutter.
Well, I'm absolutely delighted to be here, and I'm thrilled that there are as many people joining us tonight as I see are joining us, because I really think that the information that we're going to talk about tonight is so critically important, and it's all brand new. It's all brand new. I mean, who knew? You know, 5 years ago, we wouldn't have had this conversation, so it's very exciting.
Well, we wouldn't, because I've known you for over a decade now, and I've always been wrapped with, you're very progressive and often disruptive views of brain health. And
disruptive,
these weren't
I love
conversations,
that.
These weren't conversations we had before.
And people say, why are you always putting yourself out on the limb? And I tell them because that's where the best view is.
Oh, you better believe it. That's where you have the most fun, too. I finished Brainmaker on the plane 2 days ago, and I'm really still reeling from the research and information that you exposed on the gut-brain connection. So starting from there, what is the gut-brain connection, and why does it matter?
Well, let me take a step back and ask ourselves why we are even having a discussion in an attempt to validate this sort of new idea that the brain is connected to the gut, when health sciences throughout the history of mankind never made a distinction between body parts. We were looked upon as representing a whole. I wrote an op-ed for the Daily Beast a couple of weeks ago on this exact topic. So it's only very recently, in the past 100 years or so, that we've segregated the body into its individual parts. The brain is here and the gut is there. And now suddenly people are saying, well, there's some sort of connection between the gut and the brain. That's right. They were never disconnected, and we're just coming back around and recognizing this integration between all body parts, between the gut and the heart, between the gut and immunity and inflammation, and in creating various set points of chemistry throughout the body. So, the brain is absolutely a recipient of the good things that the gut does, well beyond what the gut does in terms of extracting nutrients from the foods that we eat. Now we recognize, which we didn't recognize even the last time you and I had this conversation, we did not recognize or embrace this extremely powerful role of the human microbiome, that 100 trillion organisms that lives within the intestines, in terms of regulating every important physiologic factor that has a bearing not just on how your brain is working right at this moment, but your long-term brain health and risk for brain disease. The reason that's so important, from my perspective, is as a neurologist, we've been pretty much practicing medicine under the doctrine of diagnose and adios, meaning, heck, we could make a diagnosis, that was all well and good, scratch our heads for a couple of days, do some tests and say, well, looks like you've got Alzheimer's or Lou Gehrig's disease, and then have nothing to offer our patients. And for me, and really to answer the question about my motivation, that's been hugely frustrating for many, many years of my 35 years in neurosciences. So now, suddenly, we realize that the answer to these and other devastating brain disorders like autism, ALS, Alzheimer's, is not in the brain, it's in the gut. That's where the fire begins of inflammation, not in the brain. The brain is the secondary organ. And all of these attempts to try to figure out what we can do with brain chemistry to help these problems has come up empty-handed. So just as an overview, that's where we are when we're now looking at how we can leverage this science of the role of the gut bacteria to lead to preventing brain disease, which is a novel idea in and of itself, and even in terms of developing novel treatments, an area that we've never had before. So it's a very exciting time. It's a very empowering time.
Well, you bring up the term bacteria, and I think for most that has a negative connotation as being in the context of disease states. However, in your description of the microbiome in humans, you emphasize the importance of microorganisms that are living on us and within us. Just who are these microbial friends that you describe?
It's a very good question because it's true. I mean, I especially as a physician was trained in a very dramatic way to fear bacteria and look upon bacteria as the enemy. You know, this is basically an emanation of the germ theory of disease, which has perpetuated until really quite recently. All bacteria were thought to be bad, hence the hand sanitizers on the end caps of every aisle in the grocery store, keeping our kids from playing in the dirt, mothers with the baby carriages with the hand wipes to make sure their kids don't get exposed to germs. You know, we, especially in Western cultures, have this incredible germophobia when you realize that, by and large, the bacteria residing in our gut are not just not harmful. They're essential for our health. They are our friends. They're not even neutral in the equation. So it does tend to reframe our consideration with reference to emotionality towards bacteria. Our lives, our very existence is totally dependent on the health of this microbiome, of this 100 trillion organisms living within each and every one of us. That's important to understand because we know that when we traumatize those organisms by overusage of antibiotic, by being born by cesarean section, drinking chlorinated water, eating foods high in sugar, etc., then when they are disrupted, it augments processes like inflammation. That's the cornerstone of things like type 2 diabetes, coronary artery disease, Alzheimer's disease, autism, and even cancer. So that begins to frame the incredible sway that these organisms carry in terms of our health. And we call these bacteria commensals, meaning co together, mensa means eat. They share the dining room table with us. They eat what we eat. That's why they're called commensals. And when you begin to think about your food choices, not just in terms of the nutrients, the macronutrients of fat, carbohydrate, and protein, and micronutrients like vitamins and minerals, but when you begin to think of your food choices in terms of how it's not just nurturing you, but nurturing the gut bacteria that outnumber your body cells 10 to 1, then you begin to look at your food and your nutritional supplements in a far different way.
So you've got me thinking about the health of my gut since reading the book. And, I'm interested, how do you determine the health of your microbiome, and what are the risk factors for an unhealthy gut?
It's an excellent question, and it's such a good question that I actually began the book with a checklist of questions that people could ask themselves, because there really isn't tip-top technology right now to tell us whether we have a healthy gut microbiome or not. There's certainly wonderful testing procedures out there to tell you what are the bacteria living within you, but the real question is, okay, so what? Is that good news or bad news now that I know that? Because we really don't know that yet, but we can gain inference as to whether our microbiome is healthy or not by asking such questions as, are you depressed? Are you more than 20 pounds overweight? Do you take antibiotics more than once or twice every couple of years? Were you born by C-section? Do you have an autoimmune condition? Are you gluten sensitive? Do you suffer from depression? Do you have type 2 diabetes? Do you have any other autoimmune condition? So these are questions. Did you have your tonsils out? These are questions that direct us to understanding that the answers in the affirmative to any of these questions could be an indication of a disrupted microbiome. So that's the approach that I think is much more relevant than trying to determine the balance of bacterial organisms and the array, because we don't know what's best as yet. One thing we do know, it seems pretty clear, is that the more diverse the population of different bacterial species within the gut, the better off people seem to be. Even, believe it or not, those individuals who tend to harbor a few parasites often tend to have lower risk for autoimmune conditions and even inflammatory conditions. So I want to be really clear for your listeners. What I just said is that it looks like, at least in population studies, that those groups who tend to have a parasite or two in general populations actually have a reduced risk for some of our most worrisome conditions, inflammatory and autoimmune. And as a matter of fact, in the book we talk about a study from Oxford in which they compared both the diversity of gut bacteria as well as the presence or absence of parasites in various countries with the incidence of Alzheimer's in those countries. And what the study found was really quite compelling. In those countries with the least amount of gut bacterial diversity, the least number of different species, and the least number of parasites, they had dramatically higher rates of Alzheimer's. It's an interesting thought that the more array of bacteria, the more diverse are the species, and even the presence of a parasite or two really characterizes how the human microbiome has been for thousands and thousands of years. Suddenly, when we sterilize the gut with various things in our food, various nutrients that we're devoid of, and medications that we're taking, like antibiotics, like the acid-blocking drugs that are so prevalent, and like the non-steroid anti-inflammatories, we reduce gut diversity, and that is associated with increased risk for obesity, type 2 diabetes, and other inflammatory and autoimmune conditions. Who knew that we were going to suffer from our hygiene? It's called the hygiene hypothesis, and it's been talked about now for about the past 8 to 10 years, and now it's really gaining traction in the major centers in America that are doing the research in the microbiome. So we've lived in this incredibly beautiful symbiotic relationship for hundreds of thousands of years with our gut bacteria, being diverse, helping us survive because it was in their interest. And we help them survive by feeding them what they've wanted and providing them an environment. Now suddenly we're traumatizing their environment, and look what's happening to our health. Here's the good news. We can absolutely reverse that process. We can absolutely press the reset button on the microbiome. And that's really the empowering part of this new book, Brain Maker. It sets the stage. It says, hey, here are the things that you may have done in your life that have screwed up your microbiome. Okay, bad news. Here's the good news. You can press the reset button, and here's how.
Well, and I think that's exciting news to, as we think about in this modern age, as we've progressed, we've cleaned ourselves sick. And
well said. I like that. I'm going to use that.
You're welcome to it. Now,
I'm going to get the .com on that before you do. Go ahead. I'm listening.
I'll race you to it. You brought up inflammation a few times, and I remember hearing this term for the first time from you, and something you wrote about extensively in Grain Brain, and you expand on it in Brain Maker. Within Brain Maker, you touch on your father, and you ask the question, what could he have done differently, having once been a brilliant neurosurgeon, to prevent his fate of being ravaged by Alzheimer's disease? And I wonder, how much has this personal experience fueled your exploration of inflammation in the microbiome?
Well, I can't say it specifically guided me to the microbiome until sort of after the fact, when I learned about the microbiome, and then I remembered his 6 weeks of intravenous penicillin for his endocarditis, and then more recently his intravenous gentamicin after he stepped on a nail trying to make a place for people to paint his house, and he was pushing down the foliage so that they could paint his home. So now that I understand this, I think these factors may well have played a role in exacerbating his condition. So, but overall, I think that my experience with him over the years has certainly galvanized my dedication to this, because my patients sometimes will say, "Gee, you just can't imagine what it's like to have a parent like this." And then I sit them down and I explain my situation, and that my father suffered from this problem, and the truth of the matter is that 4 weeks ago he passed away from his Alzheimer's disease. So let your listeners know I do fully understand what we're talking about. I understand that there's 5.6 million Americans suffering from this disease, that number will double in the next 15 years. But we can do something about it now. This is a preventable situation. And suddenly, we understand why Grain Brain was on target, why the paleo diet is on target, why limiting carbs is so effective in reducing the exact process that you characterize, inflammation in the human body. It begins at the microbiome level, because that's where this fire is having its genesis. when we disrupt the balance of gut bacteria, it leads to increased permeability of the gut lining. Then we have the ability of chemicals that should stay in the gut to get into the systemic circulation, and that is what amplifies inflammation from head to toe. Again, the cornerstone of diabetes, of cancer, autism, Alzheimer's, and every other degenerative condition that you don't want to get.
Well, David, first, I'm very sorry for your loss. I didn't know that your father had passed.
And you know, it's okay to talk about it because he's right here with me, telling me that I'm doing the right thing, and we're moving ahead. So it's all good. I mean, that's what this life is about. You know, it's to learn these lessons and then just try to leave this place a little bit better than it was when you got here. And I learned that from him. So, you know, I often sing this song to myself, or I sang it a lot when I was leaving his nursing home. It goes, the leader of the band is tired, his eyes are growing old, but his blood runs through my instrument, and his song is in my soul. My life has been a poor attempt to imitate the man. I'm just a living legacy to the leader of the band. It's a Dan Fogelberg song. And
oh, I know it, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, and you know what? My life has been and I wouldn't say a poor attempt. I'm satisfied with my level of achievement, but I'm imitating the man. His dedication to helping others, those less fortunate. I marveled at it growing up, and that's again a big part of what motivates all of us to continue what we're doing. And believe me, we're just getting started. This microbiome idea that I talk about in Brainmaker, this is a brand new playing field. We've suddenly burst into a new stadium, and we left the old stadium behind. We're in our new digs here, and we've got a whole array of powerful new tools that maybe we'll talk about some of them.
Yeah, well, it is, as we get into this, one of the things that you write about, and is a big conversation, is antibiotics. It seems anytime you go into your local instant medicine clinic with a cough or a sniffle, you're getting a script. And clearly there's a time and place when they are warranted, but isn't the overuse really doing more harm than good?
Yes, and that's a categorical statement without any reservation. Is there a time and a place for antibiotics? Absolutely. But when the World Health Organization tells us that the overusage of antibiotics is one of the top 2 major health risks for the 21st century, that's really scary. And they're telling us that from the perspective of the creation of antibiotic-resistant organisms, or superbugs, for which we will have no treatment. But when we start to look at the overusage of antibiotics through the lens of alterations in the microbiome, it adds a lot more fuel to our fire of concern. So we help to create changes in the microbiome that can code for things like obesity and inflammation when we use antibiotics. Wonderful book that recently came out is called Missing Microbes, and in that book is described how the usage of antibiotics so prevalent in children may well explain their obesity. I mean, after all, why do we give? Well, I don't do it, but why are antibiotics given to cattle? Why? Because it makes them fat. That's why. Right. 75% of the antibiotics used in America go into raising cattle because it makes them fat. Well, Dr. Martin Blaser, in his wonderful book, Missing Microbes, talks about how this happens in humans, and he talks about his animal experiments in which he's transferred human microbiomes into laboratory rats, and they get fat without changing their food. Why? Because they gain microbes that extract more calories from the same amount of food. Very scary. Why are people getting fat drinking diet drinks that have no calories, that have no sugar, and yet risk of obesity is higher? Risk of diabetes is higher in comparison to people drinking the same amount of sugar-sweetened beverages. Why? Because of the effects of aspartame in terms of changing the microbiome. Wow. Well, we all know people who are sucking down liter bottles of these diet sodas day in and day out and don't lose weight. They're getting heavier and heavier, and they're doing so because their microbiome is being changed. And these changes in the microbiome not only relate to inflammation and obesity, but they directly relate to depression. We now understand that there is a fundamental and very powerful relationship between changes in the gut microbiome, inflammation, and mood changes, specifically depression. So when we're loading people up with drugs to so-called increase their serotonin levels in the brain, the Paxils, the Prozacs, the Zolofts, actually we're focusing only on the smoke and ignoring the fire. The fire of depression is a gut issue. It's related to permeability changes. We can measure that. I have graphs in BrainMaker that demonstrate that show these profound elevations in inflammation markers within the body. If people are up to speed on that, it would be LPS, or lipopolysaccharide. And you've read that. You see those graphs that appear in the book. Let me tell you, BrainMaker is the #1 brain health book in America now. We haven't even started, to work on it in terms of marketing it, and people are buying the book because they want answers, and they know that there are no answers in the form of a prescription pill. I know that. I mean, I'm on the dispensing end of that equation, and how incredible it is that such high-level science is finally giving us these answers, and it's not in the brain. It's in the gut. Who knew?
Well, it's, you've touched on depression and obesity, which I wanted to get to. I think it's really interesting, no pun intended, but the solution to obesity could be in the gut. One of the other, very prevalent mental health conditions that we're seeing beyond depression is ADHD. And is there a link to the gut and attentional deficits?
Well, I think there's really no question. I mean, even beyond the gut, there's certainly a powerful link between ADHD and even straightforward nutrition. And you and I have had this conversation in the past, and what we understand, which is really so empowering now, is that some of the changes that are in response to nutrition, positive changes that we see with respect to ADHD, are happening, now we understand, because of changes in the gut bacteria brought on by making dietary changes. So, we understand that the gut bacteria have a huge role to play in the manufacture of a particular neurochemical called GABA. And this has been demonstrated now in humans. It's been demonstrated in laboratory animals. So GABA is really front and center in terms of the chemistry of ADHD. But understand, this isn't targeting brain GABA. It's targeting gut bacteria. It's targeting inflammation. Why would the risk of ADHD be increased threefold in children who were deprived of their initial microbiome? In other words, born by cesarean section. When a child is born by C-section, he or she doesn't pass through the birth canal and therefore doesn't experience this microbial baptism, doesn't pass through the birth canal where there's this rich display of nurturing bacteria that will inoculate that child's microbiome and set the stage for better brain health and better overall health. Now, to be clear, I am not saying that people shouldn't be doing C-sections. Absolutely, it's a necessary procedure at times when there's a complication. It's fantastic that we have this procedure, but to consider that a third of all births in America are now C-section is really difficult to appreciate when you look at other developed countries where the rates are extremely low in comparison to ours. So to be fair, some C-sections are necessary. On the other hand, some are done as a matter of convenience. When parents-to-be understand that C-sections are associated with a significant increased risk of autism, ADHD, type 1 or autoimmune diabetes, gluten sensitivity in the form of celiac disease, another autoimmune condition, allergies, and even obesity as an adult, simply related to being born in a way that deprives their baby of their first exposure to bacteria, they may think differently about choosing that as a method of birth.
Well, certainly, and I recall back with my wife and I and with our son, who's 5 now, that our obstetrician tried to schedule a C-section around good ski days. He was a January baby, and we were absolutely appalled at this practice.
Yes.
It was for his convenience, not for ours.
My hope is, the word doctor doesn't mean healer. It actually means teacher. That's my mission, and people need to make their own decisions about whether or not they're going to take an antibiotic when they have a cold, how they are going to change their dietary choices, whether they exercise or not, and if they choose to deliver their children by C-section, if it's an option. Clearly, again, it may not be an option. Everybody embraces that notion. But if it's an option, that was my purpose in that section of Brainmaker. At least understand these statistics taken from our most well-respected, peer-reviewed journals that are telling us, matter of fact, risk of ADHD is tripled if your child's born by C-section. You need to know that up front, because that's a disease, or a situation rather, that's affecting 6 million American children right now. And the appalling part of that number is that 2/3 of these kids are receiving mind-altering medications, the long-term consequences of which have never actually been studied. That's a scary proposition. 4% of American adults have actually been given that diagnosis as well. And what most doctors tend to think is that ADHD is basically a Ritalin deficiency, because that's how you treat it. If I have vitamin D deficiency, I take vitamin D. If I have ADHD, I take an amphetamine-like drug. Well, we need to have the discussion about the downsides of those drugs. And I would submit that it's time that we recognize that certain lifestyle choices or health choices tend to reduce the risk of ADHD, reducing your child's exposure to antibiotics, having that child born by vaginal delivery if at all possible. Breastfeeding is dramatically associated with reduced risk of developing ADHD. Parents need to know that, because all of a sudden they're going to get a phone call from the first grade teacher saying, your child isn't paying attention, you might want to go ahead and put him on Ritalin. Yes, teachers are making those medical recommendations. We know that happens. And parents generally, they don't want their child to fall behind, and what do? Again, 2/3, when they're given that information, opt for medication. So maybe that's the right choice for them, but maybe it isn't. And my purpose in writing Brainmaker is at least to lay out the playing field. Then what play you choose to run after you've had your huddle is up to you, but you need to know what the defense is doing.
You certainly do, and on that, I want to go beyond ADHD and jump into autism spectrum disorder. The current prevalence from the latest information from the NIH is 1 in 68 in the U.S., and parents are clearly seeking answers for prevention and treatment. In Brainmaker, you detail a case of a boy named Jason, and his mom brought him to you because he was deemed to be on the autism spectrum. Can you talk to us a bit about Jason and your recommended course of treatment to help him? We've had a number of people interested in that particular treatment, and I'd love to hear your words on it.
I'd be delighted to. I talked to his mother maybe 2 hours ago today, and he continues to just improve on a day-to-day basis. And this is a 10-year-old child with fairly advanced autistic spectrum disorder issues, with pretty much almost full inability to verbally communicate, did do some sign language, social skills had never really developed. He could speak a word or two, but a really aggressive history of trauma to his microbiome, aggressive antibiotics for pneumonia on 2 occasions, and mother herself took antibiotics daily for the entire 3rd trimester when she was pregnant with him. So we get a sense then right off the bat that this is a situation in which the microbiome was significantly traumatized. And now that we've seen so much research that has demonstrated these huge changes in gut bacteria that correlate with autism, we began aggressively rehabbing his gut. How did we do it? Oral probiotics. We then began rectal probiotics. And finally, I had a discussion with his mother with reference to a technique called fecal microbial transplant, which means harvesting the microbiome, the fecal material from a healthy donor, and instilling it into his colon. What an aggressive thing. What a crazy idea to do for a brain disorder. Who would have thought of such a thing? Well, as a matter of fact, the University of Arizona has just completed recruiting a huge group of autistic children to do exactly that same treatment, fecal microbial transplant, to determine how it fixes their microbiome and what will be the clinical responses of these kids to this treatment. Jason's clinical response was nothing short of breathtaking. I was giving a lecture in Germany when his mother sent me a video of him on my cell phone that I looked at just before I went up on the stage, and this is a kid talking, telling his mother about all kinds of things. It was breathtaking. I mean, it brought tears to your eyes. His mother called me and said, you know, our son, he's able to communicate. We're just amazed at what's happened. So we posted his video, this video of this child speaking and telling her what he's having for lunch on our website, drperlmutter.com, with her permission. And his whole story is right there, drperlmutter.com. Now, to be clear, Alex, I'm not saying to all of your listeners, if you have a loved one who's on the spectrum, my goodness, go right out and do a fecal microbial transplant. I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is that this experience with this child really drives home the message that autism may very well be not a brain disorder, but a gut-related disorder. Every parent of a child on the spectrum knows full well that their child has digestive issues. It's the first thing they notice long before the speech issues and long before the social interactive issues that they experience. These kids, in the first few weeks of life, have huge digestive issues, and they persist. So we know, based upon that, and based upon the analysis of the gut bacteria in autism, that there are some significant things that are out of kilter, and that reprogramming the gut may well be the answer. Maybe it's not, but may well be the answer for this situation. I'm willing to move forward and at least open the door to exploring this idea. And to be clear, I don't do fecal transplants. There are places around the country, around the world where people can go and have this done. It's nothing I do in my office, that's for sure. But what a response in this kid. It really was very, very encouraging. And, his mother and father are just over the top joy and full of joy based upon his response.
I was floored when I read his case, and I thought it was very encouraging. I want to go a little.
Go to my website, drperlmutter.com. Look at his video.
I've got it.
It'll take your breath away. This is a kid who couldn't talk.
Unbelievable. Going broader, in the book you mentioned fructose is one of the most common sources of calories in the Western diet.
Yeah,
what effect does it really have on us?
Well, fructose is a bad player. And it is on so many counts a bad player. We talked about that really quite extensively in Grain Brain because of its the way that glucose actually changes proteins, a process called fructation. And what fructose does is it binds to proteins, and it actually leads to changes in proteins, a process more commonly known as glycation. But when you do that to your proteins, it just dramatically amps up inflammation and amplifies the production of what are called free radicals, so the damaging chemicals for which we all like to take antioxidants. But beyond that, the other bad aspect of fructose is, unlike glucose, the other sugar that's commonly in fruit, commonly in our diets, glucose stimulates the body when you consume it to make insulin. And insulin is very important because, A, it helps to push the glucose into the cell so your blood sugar then goes down, and B, it stimulates your body, insulin, it tells your body that you're eating and it's time to stop. So it's what we call satiety hormone. It tells you that it's time to stop eating. Well, fructose doesn't do that. So that's really why fructose is so strongly related to weight gain and why it's of such concern when it is the major sweetener used in America today. High fructose corn syrup, of course, contains about 55% fructose, which is an awful lot compared to what you might find in nature. But beyond that, since we know that diet itself has such a key role in shaping the microbiota, we now understand that fructose itself imparts some direct changes in terms of the microbiome when it's consumed in the diet to augment the production or the changes in the gut microbiome, the milieu, the bacterial species that grow for the worse. So multiple effects. Its effects on not telling us we are full, on glycation or fructation of our proteins leading to increased inflammation, and its direct effects upon the makeup of the gut bacteria. We do know that in diets that are higher in fructose, that markers of gut inflammation, specifically something called LPS, are higher as well. So it's really something that I think is an eye-opener for people when they read that, and really something very important to reduce in the diet.
Well, certainly, and in line with the fructose discussion, we keep hearing more and more about the perils of gluten. Do you believe everyone should eliminate gluten from their diet?
I've heard of this gluten stuff.
You have?
I do. I think that, yes, about 1.6% of the global population has celiac disease. That's a lot of people. I was going to say it's not a lot of people. Well, 1.6 of the world, that turns out to be a lot of the population. Turns out that probably 70, 80, 90% of these people, depending on who you read, don't know it. Close to 90%, according to some statistics of people with celiac disease, don't even know it. They're sick and they don't know why. But the percentage of people who are sensitive to gluten is specifically sensitive to gluten is unclear. Maybe around 30%, maybe more, maybe less. But when you look at the current research about what happens in the gut when all humans consume gluten, what you find is that there is destabilization of the cement that holds the lining cells of the gut together. In other words, there is increased permeability or leakiness of the gut in 100% of humans upon consumption of gluten. That was research coming from a Harvard researcher. Now, does that mean everyone should avoid gluten? I'd like to say yes, because I don't think you should have a leaky gut, and I think you need to do everything you can to avoid that. Lord knows that the human microbiome in Western cultures is already messed up. When you add gluten and increase permeability and allow things like LPS to get out of the gut into systemic circulation and lead to inflammation, that's not what you want to do. You want to do everything you can to reduce inflammation, and that fundamentally includes reducing the leakiness of the gut. That's why we want less fructose and we want less gluten in the diet.
Well, easier said than done. I mean, bread, pasta, carbs are absolutely everywhere. And, what's your advice? What's the easiest place for a carb addict to start their journey to recovery from a leaky gut? Where do they begin? I think they should probably begin from a place of understanding and empowerment. And that means, having a moment where they come face to face with the facts, what medical science is telling us today, that carbs are going to lead to an early death and an unpleasant illness that will take you there. So I'm saying let's try to rationalize this and get away from just giving into our desires, our more primitive reptilian desires to eat sweet. We are all programmed to eat sweet. Why?
because sweet is a signal of ripeness. Our hunter-gatherer forebears never had sweet except in the very late summer, early fall, when the little blueberries and whatever the primordial apples must have looked like. All of these fruits tended to ripen at the end of the summer and in the early fall. And we would gravitate, liking sweet things to eat, and eat those things, seek them out. Why? Because they led to our survival. What happens? When we ate those foods that were sweet and contained glucose, it triggered the body to make, as I mentioned earlier, insulin. Now, insulin, in addition to driving sugar within the cell, actually stimulates lipogenesis, or the creation of fat. So it was this beautiful harmony between the sweet, ripening fruit at the end of the summer and in the early fall that allowed us to ingest glucose, raise our insulin levels. Therefore, we would store fat, and we made it through the winter. Fantastic. That's why we have a sweet tooth. Now, we don't need that sweet tooth these days because calories are more than abundant, and yet it's still there, and people are still giving into it. Well, the sweet tooth is more of a deep brain center kind of a thing, a hypothalamic kind of thing, if you will. If we can override that with our wonderful cortex, our wonderful prefrontal cortex of the brain that allows us to make rational decisions based on our experience and what we know, we can override our primitive desires. Maybe that's the key to overcoming this sugar addiction that so many people suffer from. It's a tough addiction. I mean, Dr. Selig has likened it to cocaine addiction. So we've got to really understand that it's a serious problem. And as I mentioned earlier, what do people do? They get this message that sugar is bad. So what do they opt for? They opt for the sugar-sweetened drinks. And when they do that, what happens is they change their microbiome. There's a wonderful new book out called Sugar Crush, How to Reduce Inflammation and Reclaim Good Health by Richard Jacoby. And in that book, again, he connects specifically this relationship between dietary sugar, which raises blood sugar, and inflammation, what you and I have been talking about.
You mentioned seasons earlier, and in Brainmaker you discuss seasonal fasting. I fast periodically and find that I, feel lighter, I feel cleaner, I feel clearer when I do it. Can you share the benefits of this, how often we should do a fast, and how long we should fast?
I will. And again, understand humans have always fasted. I don't know who invented 3 meals a day. Where did that become dogma?
Must have been the USDA.
It has to be. I mean, but humans have always fasted. We've always had times of food scarcity. So our gene expression has changed to allow certain genes to express themselves when we need to survive. When we have food scarcity, it triggers our genome to express genes that reduce inflammation, that increase antioxidant function, that aid in detoxification, and, perhaps most importantly, when we fast, we amplify the gene expression for what is called BDNF, or growth hormone for the brain. Wow. So when we fast, we actually amplify the expression of this hormone that leads our brains to grow new brain cells. Wow. And so when I talk about fasting having some powerful implications, it's based upon that science, caloric restriction augmenting BDNF, and therefore giving our brains a healthy dose of what they want, what stimulates them to grow, what stimulates them to connect to each other to form synapses, and what is also protective over brain cells. There was a wonderful report that appeared in the Journal of the American Medical Association subspecialty journal Neurology about 2.5 months ago that perfectly correlates levels of BDNF with future risk of developing dementia. Higher levels of BDNF were associated with lower levels of dementia. The 2 ways that we know you can augment BDNF production are caloric restriction and aerobic exercise, neither of which you will find on a prescription pad, unless you're my patient, because I write a prescription for aerobic exercise all the time.
Yeah, I know better at Perlmutter Health Center that's going to be on the script.
That's for sure.
Talk to us about the importance of probiotics and what probiotics should we be taking.
Well, before we jump on that, let me just say that we have access to wonderful probiotics through our food choices. Okay. That the choice of eating foods that are fermented gives us really healthy dosages of some really wonderful, good bacteria. So what does that mean? It means foods like kimchi, that has become very, very popular, kombucha, which is probably the most rapidly expanding drink in the marketplace these days, cultured yogurt, sauerkraut, other fermented vegetables, fermented meats. My goodness, there's so many of them that are out there. But beyond that, there are very good probiotic supplements that people can avail themselves to, and I think month to month now we're seeing better and better technology evolve in terms of giving you a product that is viable, that is alive, and not only is alive, but will arrive alive into your intestines. In other words, that will pass through the stomach and still be viable in your gut. Now, in BrainMaker, page, I think, 208, I list the core group of bacterial species that I think are really most well-researched and easy to find in the marketplace. If this is a recording that people can listen to again, I'll just list them very quickly. Lactobacillus plantarum. The reason I like that so much is because Lactobacillus plantarum plays a huge role in maintaining the gut lining integrity. In other words, reduces the leakiness of the gut. And, studies have demonstrated that it's effective even in reducing food allergies, for example. So it helps us absorb nutrients, a really important species. Everyone has heard of Lactobacillus acidophilus, very common. Lactobacillus brevis is another strain of Lactobacillus that you get when you eat sauerkraut, when you eat pickles. Lots of positive immune implications of Lactobacillus brevis. And then there are two species of what are called the bifidobacteria that I tend to like. One is a Bifidobacterium lactis, which we find in yogurt, for example, and kefir, and this has some really significant immune implications. And then there's Bifidobacterium longum, which is one of the great bacterial species that will colonize the intestine of the newborn infant, because they acquire that when they pass through the birth canal. And really important because it enhances the body's antioxidant activity, so it can serve us to help scavenge free radicals. And it actually also, at least in laboratory animals, Bifidobacterium longum has been demonstrated to increase the production of this growth hormone for the brain called BDNF. So we add that to the list with the omega-3 DHA, caloric restriction, and aerobic exercise. So that's the big five.
Thank you so much. And
I hope you got that. There will be a quiz following this tonight.
Well, I've got page 208 and 209 and 210 right here in front of me.
Good. I hope I got them right.
They're there, and you got them right. Talk to us a little bit about the role of GMO in gut and brain health.
Well, always a hot button, a GMO. Yeah. And, I know Dr. Oz recently was challenged by his comments with reference to GMO. He at least said, gosh, as consumers, we have the right to know. And I totally agree with him. With GMO being required labeling in more than 60 countries worldwide, I think we as Americans should have the right to know. But I'm going to take it a bit further. Do I think GMO food represents a clear and present danger? I absolutely do. And why do I feel that way? Because by and large, here in America, foods are genetically modified so that they are resistant to specific herbicides. The most common, of course, being the herbicide glyphosate, chemical name for what is the active ingredient in Roundup. So companies are creating, or a company is creating, Roundup-resistant corn, Roundup-resistant soy. So these are genetically modified seeds to make these crops so that they can then spray the very foods that people will then eat with this herbicide, this poison called glyphosate. That's my objection more than any other, because we know that glyphosate damages the human microbiome. It affects our ability to absorb minerals. It affects mitochondrial function, and it leads to gut permeability issues. And very few people are yet talking about that. I felt that I had to cover that in Brainmaker, and I did. And, again, people can make their own choices, but ultimately people are going to vote with their wallets. And when people understand this information, I think that you will see, and you're already seeing, a huge, huge trend towards non-GMO foods. You've already seen it being announced in Whole Foods. Chipotle is looking at that. So more and more people are voting with their wallets and saying, you know what, others can eat GMO if they want to. We don't want to have anything to do with it. We'd rather not eat GMO. And I am very, very supportive of that contention.
I'm right with you. So as we're winding up our call, there are 6 essential keys that you describe to boost your brain by boosting your gut. Can you give us those high-level keys? Because I think these are the takeaways of things that people can do right now to improve their brain health.
Well, you've got to eliminate the sugar. With all due respect, for me, it's a bit of old news. It was, what Grain Brain was really focused on. We had reasons then. Now we have even more traction in terms of reasoning why you should avoid sugar. Not just because of its effect on the brain directly and its effect on glycation of proteins and therefore increasing inflammation, but now we know because of sugar's direct effect upon changing the gut bacteria. Sugar has got to go. Gluten has got to go for reasons that we've just discussed. Again, permeability, leakiness of the gut. I really want people to begin to favor the consumption of prebiotic foods. What does that mean? Foods that are rich in prebiotic fiber. That is, fiber, specific types of fiber that are found in foods like jicama, Mexican yam, dandelion greens, onions, leeks, garlic, and other foods that you could read about, Jerusalem artichoke, that contain things like inulin. The reason this is so fundamentally important is because these prebiotic foods dramatically increase the ability of these good gut bacteria to flourish. Beyond that, I want people to absolutely consider adding into their diets, adding to their plates probably twice a day what are called fermented foods. And these are, again, the cultured yogurt, kimchi, drinking kombucha, fermented vegetables, fermented meat, fish, eggs, sauerkraut, etc. And finally, well, 2 more points. I would say avoid being born by cesarean section if that's at all possible. I understand, again, it's a necessary procedure at times. I validate that. And finally, I would like people to really restrict their exposure to antibiotics unless it's absolutely necessary. Antibiotics are important. They save lives. They're wonderful. But please understand that taking an antibiotic with every cough or every sniffle will jeopardize the microbiome, and that can have long-term health consequences. When our leading medical journals like JAMA and Lancet are really warning doctors like myself about the overusage, the overprescription of antibiotics, we have to take notice. When the World Health Organization is worried about it and calling this a major threat to global health, we absolutely have to take notice of that. So, it's a lot to get your arms around, but that's, I think, the mission of Brainmaker, and that is to understand this information, understand the science, and understand that Brainmaker is about, at the end of the day, empowering yourself to make these changes through helping your friends, your gut bacteria that are doing their best to keep you healthy. And all they need is a little love. They need to be fed right. And at the end of the day, that's all I'm trying to say.
Well, I know you live what you teach. And I wondered, on a personal level, how do you keep the balance of maintaining a gut-healthy lifestyle with all the travel that you do in such a busy practice?
Well, of course, as mentioned, my impetus to do so is twofold. It is, certainly professional, but it's also my family history, as we talked about earlier. I'm at risk. When you have a primary relative with Alzheimer's, you're at risk. So I'm really dedicated to it. This isn't a situation of do as I say, not as I do. You have to walk the talk. Because when you do that, then you're able to interact with people and say, I've learned about how to do this, how to travel, as you just asked me. So I scope out where I'm going ahead of time and find out where the health food stores are. And sometimes when I go to certain parts of America to lecture or to appear on television, I know ahead of time there are going to be huge challenges. Certain states that you go to, and I'm not going to name them, they present challenges. And so what do? I pack my food. I will pack avocados at various stages of ripeness, cans of sockeye salmon, bags of certain things, of kale chips. I will bring food along, and I know it seems strange, but it matters a whole heck of a lot to me. And in certain places that you go, it's not easy to do. So how unfortunate is that it takes so much effort to eat right. But I think in moving forward over the next few years, we're going to see a real upsurge in non-GMO foods and also in these fermented foods. I know we're already seeing that, but also in various products being developed that will allow us, with portability, to take some of these things along for the ride. The prebiotic fiber and even some of the probiotic-enriched foods that, you can get away without refrigeration for a day or two. So I think it's going to, I'm hoping, and I think so, it's going to get a lot easier.
Well, those are great tips. And that brings us to the conclusion of our hour together. And I want to thank you.
Went fast.
It does go fast. And for all of our listeners, to learn more about Dr. David Perlmutter, please visit drperlmutter.com. And remember, go get your copy of Brainmaker if you haven't done so already. For more information on the listening program and Advanced Brain Technologies, visit advancedbrain.com or just give us a call at 801-622-5676. You can access a recording of tonight's program on our website on Friday, or you can just subscribe to the listening program radio and podcast on iTunes to listen to this and other shows. I want to thank you all for listening, and once again, thanks to you, Dr. Perlmutter, for joining us, and congratulations on Brainmaker already being a New York Times bestseller.
Alex, I
great
sure appreciate the opportunity to share what is my passion, and it's a great venue, and I appreciate all your good work.
Thanks so much. Goodbye, everybody. Have a great evening.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Advanced Brain Podcast with best-selling author, keynote speaker, and founder of Advanced Brain Technologies, Alex Stoneman. In the show notes, you can find links to all the resources mentioned in this episode. Please subscribe to the podcast from whichever platform you might be listening in. Of course, it's free to subscribe, and it ensures that every time we post a new episode, you'll find it right there waiting for you to listen to in your podcast app of choice. And for more information regarding the world's most innovative neuroscience-based music programs for optimal human performance, please visit advancedbrain.com.